Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Saint. You're listening to the Polemic Pool. And last time we did this, we had three of us, and Laura Casaletto was unavailable. This week, we have three of us, and Jerry Bowes is unavailable. So I'm joined this evening, on my right, by my polemic argument, inquirist colleague, Steve Andersen. Say hi, Steve.
Hey, how's it going?
And to my left, I have Laura Casaletto this week.
Hi, Jeffrey Saint. Hello, everybody.
And we'd like to welcome you. Thanks for tuning in and listening to another podcast. What we're going to talk about tonight, and by talk about I mean to and around and under and over and beside, is how our thoughts influence our language, and our language influences our behavior. And I often say, and I've had the privilege many times of joining in marriage couples, and I say, if you think it, you'll say it, and if you say it, you'll do it. And there's a couple of ways that cuts. If you start thinking in a relationship, once you're married, that maybe you should get divorced, and you start talking about getting divorced, it's pretty easy to get divorced. If you're in a relationship and you start thinking about getting married and you talk about getting married, then eventually it's a little easier to actually get married. You know, we have been hearing a lot about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. Israel ostensibly bombing Gaza back to the Stone Age. And there were some comments that I have read from both sides, and the comments were very dehumanizing. They weren't counting people who were dead. They were talking about how of those killed, 3 of them were enemy combatants, to use the parlance of the United States when we went to war in Iraq.
Sure.
So I find it easier, especially on the negative side, to take an adverse action against a person if we dehumanize them with our language. And that's the nature of what we're talking around, about, up and over and beside tonight. And that simply is how our thoughts influence our language, and our language influences our behavior. Thoughts on that, anybody? Either one be first to go and throw something out.
Sure. You're right. You can be very intelligent and use half of your brain to enslave your thoughts and keep you from actually having ideas, which I know is a direction you didn't want to go, but I see that a lot. I see that the prevailing paradigms, people realize that if they do not stick with them, their life is going to be difficult. If they do not accept cultural norms, they're going to make problems for themselves. So they just accept that, and they use a lot of their mental firepower to rein themselves in and stay within certain parameters.
Okay, now relate that to the thought process, the language to express the thought process, and the action on the language.
Okay, you're concerned about people treating other people badly.
I'm concerned that we have dehumanized each other to the point that if we kill someone, it's not as if we killed a human being. They're just collateral damage, as if...
Yes, you've made your point twice now, Jeffrey.
Well, you didn't get it, so I'm going to make it again.
I totally understood you.
If I want to bomb your house, and I blow out your neighbor's windows and take down your other neighbor's garage, well, that's collateral damage, and that's okay. When we get to the point where we have to take out enemy combatants and we're willing to sacrifice any number from 1 to infinity of civilian lives not associated with that person, and that's okay, I have a problem with that.
I completely understood your point. I feel this all the time. I realize as I'm driving down the lovely paved roads of my lovely city that it's built on the bones of all the dead that came before, many who were sacrificed to make quote-unquote progress. I understand your point completely, but I just see it as one part of a huge problem of freedom. Freedom
but
of
let's
thinking.
not go to that. I don't want to go that big. Let's stick to the topic and not blow the thing up so that we don't end up talking about the topic.
Okay, but I do like to focus my lens in and out. Okay, but okay.
Well, okay. This I want you to kind of zoom in, because we got a lot of things we could talk about. For example, in the United States, our news has just been dominated by Ferguson, Missouri. And we talk about people in Ferguson, Missouri through what constitutes our media.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to talk again, and then we'll give Steve a chance.
Laura, I hate it when you do that. we talk about them as protesters.
Yes.
Police shot and killed 3 protesters. No, the police shot and killed 3 human beings.
3 citizens.
And yet, whenever somebody shoots and kills a cop, we hear all about the humanity of the policeman's life and how what a tragedy it is that he gave his life for these other people, and we deify them. Well, I think we can both deify and demonize equally with language, and I'm very concerned that in Ferguson we read protesters. In Gaza, we read, in the Palestinian-Gaza conflict, we read terrorists. We read about collateral damage in terms of the people killed in Iraq through the actions of the United States invasion and occupation. That's where I want the lens focused.
Okay. But I think the best way to combat this problem of desensitization of other people is to just look broader, sorry Jeff, and just say everybody is a human being. Everybody wants to live. We want to treat all human beings fairly and equally. And when you do that, you can't go, oh, well, that gay person offends me morally, or that black person isn't well educated, and blah. You know, whenever you go this specific group of people, you can find something you don't like about them. That's true of any group of people, right?
And that's the point I'm making, Laura. You
Right.
just illustrated it.
Right. But when you just say, these are human beings, and then you think about what a human being is, then you realize they're precious. They're someone's child or parent, or, they have a whole connected life, just like you. They're just like you.
Well, that's right. Everyone who's ever lived has been born of parents. They may or may not have had brothers or sisters, but they have been someone's son or daughter, and if they've had kids, they've been someone's mother or father. We're human beings, and we share that, and I feel it's being taken away by how we think about and talk about others.
Well, interesting conversation, and I understand your point, Jeffrey. I always, it seems like, or at least I get the impression that it seems like that you have the impression that life needs to be fair, and that you want to single-handedly adjudicate things in order to make it fair. I'm not sure that that's going to happen, number one. Let me just end my little statement by saying when you look at history, it's always written by the triumphant. And so when you talk about people and using phrases or calling them by different names, it's usually the people in power that have that get the license to do that, and they're in charge of the media, they're in charge of the political system, and so consequently they get to choose the names they want to for the victims, whoever they are. So.
Well, and it sounds like we don't really have a lot of disagreement here tonight on this particular topic.
You mean we're all decent humans?
Well, we're decent humans.
Okay, and we're not governments, so we don't play that side.
A government is really nothing.
Okay,
I mean, it's comprised of people.
It's guys with political ends and money to be made.
Well, it's men and women who use a system called politics to control others.
Yeah.
Like religion, which is a system employed by people to control others through something other than politics. And occasionally they mix together, like what's going on in Iraq right now. And if you were to survey or just listen to the news, you don't have to do your own survey. It's probably not all that possible. Look at the headlines. Listen to what the people in Iraq, listen to what the Islamic State is saying about those who oppose them. Mm-hmm. They're animals. Mm-hmm. They deserve to be beheaded. they deserve to be raped. They deserve to be pillaged and plundered and killed and left for dead. And in fact, we're going to take control of the Mosul Dam, where we have our airstrikes concentrated right now because of that dam. It was poorly engineered. And if that dam breaks, it's estimated, and there's consensus on this, a 65-foot wall of water would inundate everything and everyone downstream, right down the Tigris River. I mean, we're talking, to use perhaps a bad pun, a catastrophe of biblical proportion. And that's what the Islamic State is threatening to do. And we're saying, you can't do this because although the people believe differently than you, they're still human beings entitled to their beliefs. If we don't talk about them as human beings, well, how much credence do we give them then? And what makes them different than a brick wall that we took down by accident? Wrong brick wall. We can build that brick wall again. Yes, you can make more people. We didn't get to 7 billion people in the world without making them. But you know what? You can't make another one just like the one you took.
And that is so tragic. That is the tragedy.
And my tragedy on this is the linguistic side of it that makes it so easy to ignore the human factor. And I'm concerned about that. And I think we should raise that up. I know, there are various bodies in the world that are talking about humanity and humanitarian efforts and why and how everybody should matter. But it seems like their voices are squelched by what Laura said. People in power who have a differing opinion, who are in control of the narrative of how we talk about different peoples. And when we talk about them differently enough, eventually we come to recognize them as something other than equal human beings, and it makes it okay to take that life away from them. I disagree with that. I see it happening, and it hurts.
Well, to me, it's so prevalent, so obvious, so flagrant, so ubiquitous that I really don't know what to say about this discussion. It's a slam dunk. It's happened through the annals of history, and I'm not sure I can add any more other than I'll give you a little anecdotal conversation I had on Facebook last night when they were talking about the Ferguson situation. And the conversation went something like,
Excuse me.
well, shoot the bastards for pillaging and stealing from breaking into stores and taking things and this and that. Well, of course nobody condones anybody stealing someone else's property, but that missed the whole point about demonizing one group, a small subset that thought they could take advantage of the situation and break into stores and steal things. Has nothing to do with the honest people that feel that the police are out of control. So, I just get very, very impatient with the narratives that are created, and they're so one-sided. I don't have much patience even talking about it anymore.
So Laura, I'm curious. Steve talked passionately, personally, introspectively about his take on a conversation he had with someone who said, just go in and kill the bastards. And it's interesting, I was reading today, they've, obviously we know now, if we've been paying attention to the news, the National Guard's been called in. Before the National Guard was called in, the state police were called in to relieve the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department from their responsibility and their militarization. And they imposed a curfew, and the chief in charge of what's going on down in Ferguson lifted the curfew. and had said in a press conference this morning, I want you, basically, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I want you to understand, I know it is a small minority of people who are taking the opportunity with the cover of night
Of course.
to be violent
Yes.
and to be criminals.
Yes.
Most of the people here are not like that.
Of
So
course
he's
not.
trying to respond to most of the people and saying there's going to be a cost. And the cost is a couple of reporters were put in jail for a short amount of time. One of them was from Germany, and he said, yep, sometimes if we tell somebody to get back, we don't know if they're a legitimate reporter or not. And so we'll make an arrest, and if we find out that we shouldn't have arrested that person, well, we'll deal with that and let them go. I don't know what the end is, because the idea that they're just bastards and you can go and shoot everybody, and I've heard that put forth, that is one side of the issue, and it sickens me too. I mean, there's no thought, there's no critical examination in the perspective that, because there's looting and there's some violence, just get rid of all of them. And I think there's a changing of the guard and the authority down in Ferguson, but it may be the proverbial too little too late, and we'll wait to see how it spreads. The police chief in Detroit has said, citizens, arm yourselves because we can't protect you.
Mm-hmm.
This is in our state.
Yes.
And he's called for the citizens, if you he's not saying go out and get a gun illegally. He's saying if you can legally get a gun, you owe it to yourself and your loved ones to have a gun to protect yourself, because we can't.
I understand.
Wow. That's the society we've come to live in.
Yes.
But how do you use the gun? Whom do you use the gun against? How do you think about that person that's knocking on your door at 4 o'clock in the morning who's had a car accident? And yes, in Michigan, we have the castle doctrine. You can answer the door with your gun in your hand because it's your domicile and you have that right.
Sure.
But does that mean you also have the right to just shoot without getting any information from the person? In other words, shoot first, ask questions later. Well, not really, but we've had a trial on a case just like that.
You started this saying, Laura, I'm curious.
Yeah, so Laura, I am curious about what you think about these kinds of things.
I think that when there is no respect for the rule of law from those who administer it, the people will rise up. And my hot-blooded heart rises up with them, and I don't fault the looters. Because if the people in charge are going to crush and destroy you or your relative or your neighbor, what do you care about a TV set inside of a department store? It's a legitimate sort of visceral, powerless response to an abuse of power by those in power.
No.
Wait, I'm not done, okay? I have several thoughts to lay out here for you so that you understand my point of view. All right.
You made a very strong statement on that point. They're not hurting the law enforcement authorities against whom you would say they're acting out by going and looting. They're actually hurting their own community.
I understand it's a stupid response, but it's a blood response. And what we are discussing today is this type of stupid, visceral responses. Your fellow human being becomes the other and you go kill him. That's what we're talking about here, right? So
I hadn't thought about it that way.
We have to, that's why I'm trying to lay
in the
out
case of justifying the looting.
And as Steve said, this is through time, this is the type of things we've done. So you, Jeff, were asking yourself questions that brought us to this topic. And I have been asking myself very similar questions too. Usually when I ask myself and I think about things over time, I get answers. I just keep asking myself, what's up with us humans? And why are we like this? And can we override our own programming to be this way? To have the other, the enemy, and to go after him and kill him? Because that's what we do. And that's natural. It had advantages through time, right? It had some advantages.
Of course.
And, I'm a positive person, so I tend to go, like, the internet will save us all. We'll be able to communicate without gatekeepers and lawgivers. And when the powers that be say, that's the other, everybody, get torches and go burn them out, we'll kind of go, wait a minute, we're Facebook friends. Literally, I've got a Facebook friend in Pakistan. I've got a Facebook friend in Japan, and we're friends. Like, we're best friends in each other's countries.
And that's going to keep you from hurting them?
No.
Okay.
I'm still working on my points here.
Okay.
Okay, because that's inadequate. The internet is inadequate to solve our basic programming.
Sure.
So we have to deal with it. And the other thing you have to address is the fact that in this country, I pretty sure we're going to go downward economically. And it's going to lead to violence. Our cities have no money. Our pension funds have no money. I would think soon the police are they're going to retire. There won't be money for them. Pension funds of government employees all across the country are emptied. So poverty's coming, folks. And, fracking ain't going to save us. Our way of life is going to change. Our government is loading all the cities with tanks, which they're getting ready to fight the citizens.
Well, in
Drones,
fact,
tanks,
I have a
rifles.
friend who used to be a cop, and he's a Facebook friend. I consider him to be a pretty good friend of mine, a lot younger than me. And in response to what was going on in Ferguson, and a couple of pictures I posted, one of them being the cop sitting with a machine gun atop a heavily armored vehicle behind a line of combat dressed police officers marching through with lines of vans whose only purpose was to collect prisoners. I mean, it was obvious, the proverbial paddy wagons. And he said to me, get used to it. Basically what's happening is they're testing right now the waters, because they're going to start doing street sweeps, and this is going to become part of everyday life in America, and they want to see how people are going to respond so that they can create a scenario and train to respond to that scenario based on real life experience. Sure. And he said, if you think I'm kidding, Jeff, I was in a police department that trained us to escalate force just so we'd have a real life lab experiment, so when we got to that point, unimaginable as it is for you and me now, but in the police department, when we got to the point and we're given the order to do this, we would know how to go out and remember one thing. When it comes to the police, anything you say can be interpreted as an aggressive action against them.
Oh,
whether you're
geez.
standing on the
I
side
need
of the
alcohol.
street, whether you're holding a sign, whether you say anything to them, if you look them in the eye, we're trained how to interpret that so that we can justify escalating the tension and the action. To basically put people into a submission that gives us total control over them. And I said, wow, that's like a harbinger of the future is what you're saying. And he said, this is where it's going and this is what it's going to become. And I said, not in the America that I pledged my life to give for at one time. And he said, well, I hope so too, but I'm afraid that's naive. I don't know, but that's what he said.
I've got nothing to say. Give me alcohol right now.
I don't
That's
want
the
alcohol.
worst possible bomb you could drop, isn't it? Isn't it, Steve?
Well, it goes to how we talk about people.
Because it was just a theory in my head in a plausible future scenario. You just said, oh, no, happening.
Well, what I'm saying is my friend who was a cop is telling me this is how they were trained.
Yeah.
And I have to go along with that because I give this, I'm not going to tell you who it is, in part for his own good, because he's got, we have to be careful a little bit about how we post with each other on Facebook, because he's got a lot of friends that are still cops, some who are a little more out and agree with him, and others who would take him to task. And, he's a civilian now. He has his own house to take care of. So I understand that. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen or not going to happen. I'd hate to think that Ferguson is a test lab like many other places. But I'm also not going to say it's not. What I am going to say is what I started with. If we think it, we can say it. And once we say it, we can do it. And if we keep telling ourselves that these people who oppose us in thought are less human than we are, and we give them a very benign name, collateral, doesn't matter how much collateral we add up. If we're not going to count, people's lives taken because we got the one we wanted, pretty soon it doesn't matter how many we take, and we start dropping atomic bombs again.
It's not we.
Well, okay, I agree with you. Those of us in this room wouldn't do that, and most of our friends wouldn't do it either.
Okay, but here's the thing. How do we stop our basic programming, which seems strongly to me to be that the most persuasive argument is the shouting retard argument? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
How do we stop
Let's say
that?
you two are sitting there saying, here's how we handle this situation. But I jump up and I say, bleepity, bleepity, bleep, attack, and I go run. Everybody's going to go with me. That is what gets us. Reason does not beat crazy bloodlust rioting. It doesn't win over. That's where my thoughts went on this, as I've been thinking about this for several weeks, actually.
And it makes you wonder, how much have we really evolved?
Well, okay. Let's assume that we are the animals we are. Let's not pretend otherwise.
Well, we've ostensibly evolved with the capacity to go beyond that very base paleocortical response, and the neocortical should override that with an understanding of consequences. And yet, what I'm hearing you say is we're kind of regressing, we're devolving, and we're just base animals. And I can stand out and proclaim reason and rationality and all of the good ideas, and you can yell attack, and you're going to get a critical mass of people to come, and I'm going to be standing there quoting Aristotle.
Right. That's what will happen. I've done it myself.
Or
it has happened
when I die, I'll be talking to Aristotle, and they'll say, "How'd you get here?" I'll say, the last thing I remember is I quoted you.
And then Laura hit me in the head and ran off.
And then Laura hit me in the head and ran off.
That was
and they'll say, "Yeah, that's about how all of us got here."
Yes.
Now, I don't know where there is that would be here then, but that's a different topic.
It's totally true.
Well, you mentioned about brain functioning, and you get into the more primitive part of our brains, whether you want to call it the limbic system or whatever part of the brain you want to refer. I call it the reptilian brain. It's fight or flight, and basically it's about fear, and it's basically about loss. So let's face it. Let's cut to the chase. Caucasians who've pretty much run this country for X amount of years is shortly may become a minority. We have imprisoned so many black males now. We have the largest prison population of any other country in the world. We are very worried about our borders and who's coming in and those kinds of things.
Just want to say.
Many of us. And so I think that a lot of this is fear-based. We have people speaking Spanish. We have, people, we now have a black president. There's a lot of fear that many of the people in power for so many decade after decade after decade, that there's going to be pushback. There's going to be blowback. And perhaps Ferguson is just one of those microcosmic areas that's obvious.
So how does that bode Ferguson? I'm speaking specifically. How does Ferguson bode for us up here in Grand Rapids, Michigan? Do you see a time again when a local law enforcement officer shoots and kills a minority, an African American unarmed male, as happened in Ferguson?
Yes.
That our city blows up the same way?
Perhaps. Yeah, I could see that happening. I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen.
How can we stop it, though?
I mean, how can we stop it? Well, I think Laura might have hinted to the fact, well, she didn't say this, but at least I got from part of her conversation, it's almost like this train there's almost kind of this inertia. And once this inertia, this movement starts, it's very difficult to stop. And I don't know how, I really don't know how to stop this.
I think putting your energy towards stopping it, Steve, or putting your energy towards picking apart a particular horrible situation and finding the innocent and the guilty, Jeff, I think neither one of those will get you very far because you are still stuck in that same situation. And Jeff, you led off with the only thing we've really got, which is to combat the powers that be in our own stupid brains and everything else, which is you got to love one another. And there is power in that. And don't let other forces lead you off of that path. Don't spend all your time battling over a specific small situation with people who will pick apart the details and find legitimate facts to countermand your facts, and you'll be running a hamster wheel over there. And just stick with loving one another, and kind of this is my recommendation. You kind of disengage from the protest, reaction, abuse cycle, and you just go over to people around me I'm going to love. I'm going to build my ties with my community, with my minority friends, with my police friends, with my politician friends, and we're going to find commonality. We're going to work towards good where we can be effective. And then that also protects you from possible future scenarios, which I see coming, and I see there's a bunch of possible grim future scenarios that we, America, and we, the world, are headed toward. And I don't know which one's going to come on us or what combination of them, but we're guaranteed to get one of these horrible plague, no money in America, disease sweeping the place.
Oh, America's
pollution.
always going to have money, Laura. You're talking about the distribution of the wealth in America. You're not talking about America losing its wealth.
You can drive around in Michigan and find places where there's no
That's
money.
what I'm talking about.
We got abandoned skyscrapers.
Listen, Michigan has a lot of money. The
See
United
what you're doing?
States,
You just went to the small fact, though.
No, it's a huge fact. The United States is the wealthiest country in the world. The states are wealthy. The cities, it's the concentration of that wealth.
Fact, counter fact. I would like to point out to you, Mr. Saint, that Grand Rapids poverty level, the number of people in poverty has increased 89%.
That's kind of the point I'm making, which is another way of saying they've concentrated the wealth in the top 11%.
There we go. So, possible disasters, plenty of them. Love one another. That's what I got.
Okay, and what I'm saying is that's great for you. Grow your apple tree and feed your neighbor's apples. I think we need something systemically to change, and I believe we need to change that with how we think and how we talk before it'll change in how we act.
Well, you are much more optimistic than I am. However, since time is short, let me leave this on a positive note. One of the things that can create emotional responses and vitriol are bad experiences. Conversely, one of the things that can really bring people together are for example, natural disasters. If, for example, if there's going to be an earthquake in California or one of the faults, the many faults that we have throughout the country, and it becomes a complete chasm, just a catastrophe, I think most people are going to come together, and you will see the love that Laura is referring to. Will there be looters in part of that? Of course, but that's
they never come at first, though. They're never there the first day or the second day.
Yeah.
No, but and I think part of the problem is we have this idea that governing to the lowest common denominator is fair for everybody. Think back to Katrina. Hurricane Katrina, one of the most devastating natural disasters we've had in this country in a very, very, very long time. I don't know that we've had one that was more devastating economically and to people's lives, more upsetting than Katrina. And look at the response of the state and the official authoritative agencies. Many of them were extremely benevolent. And I believe that many of the individuals within the institution want to be benevolent.
Yes.
But they're also an authority, and they're subject to the discipline of the authoritative regime, which is the institution they're a part of. Sure. And they probably have to do things they know it's going to make it worse before it could possibly make it better. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what has happened down in Ferguson. It is a lot of what has happened in Israel and Gaza. It's a lot of what happens between Japan and China. It's a lot of what happens in Detroit. It's a lot of what happens when we have unrest locally. I think, there's a few bad actors, a few bad human beings, not bad human beings, but human beings behaving badly on both sides of the equation. Of course. I don't like is that we even have a balanced equation, meaning us versus them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we need to stop thinking it's us versus them, stop saying it's us versus them, there is no us, there is no them, and then maybe we'll behave as the collective we are.
Yeah.
You're right, Steve. If I didn't have my optimism, I think probably I would find little reason to keep going. And there's an area we didn't even talk about, and that's employment and how employers refer to their employees. We used to have personnel departments, then we have human resources. For a
Yes.
while, they decided, I don't want to just be a resource. When I was in grad school and grad business school, the term that was gaining popularity through the sustainability initiatives, which I'm all for sustainability, green initiatives, human capital. Let's refer to people as human capital. We have the triple bottom line. We have financial capital, we have human capital, we have environmental capital. We have to take care of our things, we have to take care of our people, we have to take care of our environment, from which both of the first two forms of capital come. And you know what that did? Instead of engendering more humanity, it allowed those in power, as Laura said, to look at human beings as capital and further dehumanize them, because you can depreciate capital. You can depreciate something that you go out and you buy, and it has a shelf life. And when we look at people the same way, it's just incredibly dehumanizing, and we haven't even talked about that. That could be a conversation that goes on for those, for us three and many others, for we three in this room for weeks, and we wouldn't be able to change. Or maybe we could, and maybe we would, and maybe we should. So how you think about it, how you think about anything, whatever it is, informs how you talk about it through any of your languages. And I say languages because there are constraints within each language. As Laura and I were talking before, our language is woefully inadequate to address some things within the human condition.
Absolutely.
And other cultures' languages express it beautifully.
Yes.
In an accent, in an intonation.
Right.
Whereas we need somebody who is, whose proclivity is being loquacious like myself. Way too many words to express the point. And still, the point expressed pales by comparison. Notwithstanding, we speak English right now, and for the purposes of this, if we say it, if we think it, we can say it, and if we say it, we can do it. And I think we need to change how we think, to change how we speak, to change how we act.
Well, if I could, because I think we're out of time here, but just if I could give us a pat on the back. I mean, we've had discussions before that we vehemently disagree on, but once the podcast is over, it's over. I mean, I'm going to be friends with you two, irrespective of any huge gulfs in differences as far as philosophy goes. I mean, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter, and we seem to get along handsomely regardless of our disagreements, and I don't think it's that difficult to do.
I just wish everyone could be like us.
Hey, that's a good way to end.
Thanks for listening to another edition of the Polemic Pool. Jerry, we missed you tonight, and when we get back together again next time, it'll be Jerry's topic. Thanks for being here,
And of course, we love you all.
have a great week. We're thinking good things about you. We're saying good things about you. We'll do good things for you. Give us an email. Give us a call. Bye-bye.